Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. A head of state's New Year's speech often gives us a glimpse of the direction their administration aims to go in, action-oriented and problem-solving. This is what President Yoon Suk Yeol stressed his government will be in 2024. While putting the focus on people's livelihoods, President Yoon showed his commitment to implementing major reforms in labor and education, as well as pensions. What are the details of the points President Yoon made, and how do experts wish 2024 to be for South Korea? For this, we invite Professor Hwang Myung-jin from Korea University into the studio. Welcome, Professor Hwang.
Thanks for having me.
All right. And we also have Professor Song Se-ryun from Kyung University Law School. Good to see you, Professor Song.
Good to see you.
All right, first question to our Professor Hwang. So overall, President Yoon devoted a significant portion of his New Year's address to people's livelihoods, and experts say this is quite different to last year's New Year's address. Why and how?
Well, certainly, let's take a look at the key point that he delivered message from yesterday's. First, he emphasized economy and the quality of life. Citizens, but especially the socially disenfranchised, the poor people's lives. He acknowledges economic recovery is important, and next year this year already, year 2024, we will get more of the economic hardship for poor people, and enterprise and entrepreneurship might have another type of challenges that includes high interest rate, inflation, the rising fuel price, and the prospect economic growth of the national GDP is around 1% point. That it will be another difficult year for the companies and household and government at large. In this regard, emphasizing need for economic revitalization and the price stabilization are a must. He also promised the ease of burden on citizens. And the way he approaches for the support of poor people might be a little different from the last year or the year before, because he's a believer of the liberation of the economic, the system of the market. So the housing market might be his first target to nail down the ease of the economic burden for poor people. And of course, commodity price inflation.
Right, I see. Well, thank you for your brief summary, Professor Hwang. We are going to tap on specific area mentioned during the speech one by one, but first, let's talk about economy. Professor Song, while pointing out that 2023 was a challenging year, President Yoon shared quite an optimistic outlook for 2024. In order for South Korea to witness a new leap forward, what economy-related agenda items did he mention dealing with?
Well, Korea is first and foremost the export-oriented economy, so his optimistic outlook is premised on the favorable upturn in the global economy. Indeed, experts are saying that next year will be better than the last year, but it's going to be still slow. And high inflation will kind of suck up the vitality somewhat. He did mention his efforts, especially in defense industry, high-tech sector support, supply chain protection. In the same vein, he highlighted his efforts in this what he has done in the diplomatic efforts, sales diplomacy. Meeting heads of states in some 96 countries and 151 summits and meetings. But I think the crucial factor is that to improve the economic health, reforms are necessary. And this is something that he talked about last year and this year as well, the 3 reforms in the labor sector, education, and pension. I think the problem is that nothing much has been done. The criticism is that he has focused in other areas, but the crucial reforms has been slow and incremental. And if he delivers on those reforms going forward, it will be a good driving force to strengthen the economic prowess. But if not, probably it'll hamper the potential of economic growth going forward.
All right, I see. Well, we are going to talk about three major reforms, Professor Song, but before that, let's stay on the economic front for now. And for this, Professor Hwang, in order to sustain economic vitality, President Yoon underlined the importance of getting rid of the so-called killer regulations that hinder business, investment. But what kind of regulations can we think of?
Well, as a strong believer of the market system, here try to resolve some economic challenges through the use of utilizing or vitalizing economics for the market system. First one is deregulation and decentralization and privatization and supporting more of entrepreneurship, especially for the regional areas. So the young people, so youth entrepreneurship must be emphasized, especially from this year. And then deregulation means, getting rid of many hardships and difficulties and legislations, and that hinder or slow down our economic growth and entrepreneurship for especially youth people. That way, we can get more job and have more income growth, and this is very fundamental economy 101. But we expect more of the economic growth in here. I don't know whether it's good or not, because some people might not like the idea of privatization, selling out the public asset to the private. But from my understanding, Yoon Suk Yeol's administration, it is a must. They have to go through this challenge from the other parties and civilian society.
Right, I see. So the focus is on deregulation in order to boost up the economic growth and entrepreneurship. All right, I see. Now, Professor Song, shifting gears a bit here, just as in last year's New Year's speech, President Yoon did mention his determination to dismantle so-called cartels with vested interests, saying reforms for people are not possible without fighting against them. What is the president referring to when he speaks of these cartels?
Well, cartel is a form of collusion to monopolize information, opportunities, and resources to hoard or steer power influences to specific groups or individuals. So that's why the word mafia is attached to explain what it is a lot of times. It hurts fair competition, product decision, the producer's wrong decisions, and ineffective and inefficient distribution of resources. So ultimately, it's undemocratic. I think the examples you'll find is that you can use cartels in private education, construction and real estate development, energy sector, communication, media, and so on and so forth. So it's widespread in the society. I think it's a correct message to say that the cartels need to be rooted out. But I think it is highly illegal activities. So it should be rooted out in any case. But I think the criticism has been that he's stressing too much of a rooting out these activities and not balancing it with the overall picture going forward.
I see. So cartels can be everywhere, and President Yoon is focusing that it should be rooted out, but there is also criticism that he's focusing on it too much, right?
Right.
Right, I see. Now, Professor Hwang, let's talk about three major reforms President Yoon has been keep focusing on. The first one is labor sector, where he said illicit activities, regardless of whether from workers or management, will be sternly addressed. Could you tell us the direction the Yoon administration is trying to go in terms of this labor industry?
Well, from the beginning of this administration, President Yoon explicitly announced three different types of social reform that must be taken under his term. The first is education, labor, and the pension plan. Well, these are all interlinked to each other, and they are heavily interrelated to each other. So you can't really say one without saying the other two. Labor has something to do with the pension plan because they are protecting the laborers in their later life. Education is before, and these are all interrelated. And then I guess President Yoon is the last out of three reform will be labor, but he decided to tackle down well, he's actually the former prosecutor.
Right.
So he tried to follow as it is stated in law. That really have some problem in the political way. So he might have to find a way to support his idea, not just labor union, but civilian, student, and all the employers. And that might give some hard time to go on his political agenda, and especially in this year, but later on until the end of his administration. So I really hope that he will find a way to get the consensus of this the change in labor market and union and employers and employees relationship.
Right, I see. It's really interesting how all these sectors, all these reforms are all intertwined with each other. All right. Well, Professor Song, education is one of the key sectors President Yoon outlined as part of the national agenda for 2024, as we already mentioned. Last year, there were many issues in this sector, from teachers' rights and heightened private education burden for parents. What is on the agenda for education? Could you walk us through?
Yeah, as you mentioned, the strengthening teachers' rights and stress on the public education, so those were some of the highlights or headlines in the newspaper, and he also mentioned it in the New Year's message as well, along with establishing world-class child care services, which kind of ties into combating the low birth rate, and also mentioned the supporting universities that tries to excel in a world-class level. Again, I think the criticism has been that there were the incremental actions, but not much the dynamic reforms. What is interesting, what is intertwined with what we are talking about, is that his approach to education reform seems to be somewhat like a prosecutor's approach, which is the crackdown on the private education, the big institutes, with tax investigation and so on and so forth. Just like he wanted to reform the labor sector, first and foremost, looking at the cartels, which he sees a big portion resting in the labor unions. So I understand as the former prosecutor general, he feels pretty comfortable with approaching in that area, which is not a wrong approach, to say the least. But as I mentioned before, I think that there has to be a healthy balance with a comprehensive approach going forward that ties the education sector and the economy. But I think that there has not been a picture that people can see what this conservative government is trying to achieve in the midterm and the long term.
All right, I see. So in my opinion, I guess Professor Song is trying to say that there should be another approach that is different from current administration's approach, which is quite similar to prosecutor's way. All right, I see. Now, Professor Hwang, lastly, regarding pension reform, President Yoon urged public support for a draft version of a reform plan that was submitted to National Assembly last October. However, this plan reportedly misses key elements. Could you walk us through this draft plan?
Well, mostly misled part of the pension plan, the reform that must be under reform is the depletion of the funding, funding reservoir. But more problem is the coverage. Only 50% of people, current labor and retired people, are currently covered by the national pension plan. So we have to increase this coverage. by doing something that we have never tried. And that is seriously the problem, even though we increase more of contribution of the labor and then reduce the amount of the pension check. We will never change it or fix the serious problem that that's related to our pension, national health care. Pension plan. The first one is there's the platform workers, gig workers, and the part-time workers. They're not covered, and then the small business owners, they can't afford to pay the pension plan and other types of social insurance for their employees. And this is something the government has to do with something. But previously, what we have tried was provide the public assistance for needy people, especially the elderly people, that who are need more of the pension coverage or retirement money. And that causes vicious cycles. Instead of doing that, we support the youngsters, the young generation, to pay their own social insurance by using government funding, tax money, so that we don't have to pay the less amount of subsidies for the pension plan. So it could be accumulated, and then it also gives more a salary or income effect for the young people, especially those who are working in a part-time and night job. And then later on, it accumulated into more economic effect, and we will have more increase in pension reservoir. They provide more the opportunity and investment for entrepreneurs and people in the public sector as well who needs money for this. The government target is totally wrong so far, and the president might want more of the different ideas and experience and export people. So fundamentally changes our pension plan as well as the support for the elderly people.
All right, I see your point. Now, well, up until now, we have been talking about three major reforms, and Professor Song, some argue that the results of the general election in April could either give momentum to the three major reforms that we have talked about, or significantly diminish the drive for implementation. However, experts emphasize the need to promptly address reform tasks regardless of the election results. What is your view on this?
Oh, I would agree. I think that what happens in the general election, upcoming election, is very, very crucial. Look, the reforms are difficult to begin with because the reforms will involve painful sacrifices from the stakeholders. So there will be a lot of resistance and oppositions. That's why the debates and national consensus building and most of all, governments taking the driver's seat is very, very important. But if they fail to attain the majority or winning the majority in the general election, it's going to be much, much harder for virtually lame duck president to drive any substantive reforms. Well, they will still try to drive the reforms regardless of the result of the general election, but the accomplishments will be very uncertain without the help of the legislature. And it's going to be a very uphill battle. So I think that he has to turn around the currently very low approval rate. By the way, the Western countries or OECD countries leaders suffer from the low ratings at this point because of the stagnant economy and the social issues of many different varieties in their countries, but it cannot be an excuse. So I think that going forward, until the general election, it is very crucial to map out what he wants to do, but most of all convince people that that is a plan that should be implemented. I thought the reform agenda last year was a good agenda. I think it is still a good agenda. The criticism that nothing much has been done is a kind of a sore point for the president, but I think he still does have the time and map out the reform agenda in a very substantive way, so that they will reflected in the general election and campaign, so that the government can drive through those reform agendas in a very substantive way.
All right, I see. Well, though reforms will be difficult to do, we'll definitely need to promptly tackle it. All right, well, Professor Hwang, actually, the low birth rate is actually at the core of all of these issues. Could you tell us the direction the administration needs to take in order to tackle this low fertility rate? You're the expert, right?
I assume so. It is right. President Yoon are pretty much interested in resolving this problem in his own way, and then we are not sure whether this is right direction or not. But we, as a demographer, we understand that this administration is working very hard on moving forward. One is housing prices, and there's a special subsidies for the couple, the family that has the first child born in the future. There's special the funding is for them to afford the housing. That's one big issue that's new news today. There's a easier way and a difficult way of resolving this problem, because population, everybody knows that this is the biggest challenge of this country, and housing, the price of housing is another big challenge, and these things are pretty much resolved because they are pretty much related. Because youngsters, young couples, they are afraid of not getting the affordable housing, and then that causes so. But the problem solution is not that easy. Lowering housing price does not really make people marry and have children, because things are very complicated already, because it's been 30 years since we got low fertility. What is promising is we are not the only country. This is not the first time we got the low fertility, especially the East Asian country. We are all having these issues. As a new human society, we are the leader of new human society that has low fertility, and it's going to be ongoingly perpetuate in our society in the future, maybe next generation, 20 or 30 years. And that makes us more, wiser, smarter, how we live, how we care each other, how we take care of the poor people, especially President Yoon announced that we are taking care of the poor people in our neighbor. That's the kind of thing we must take care of, doing things right away. And other thing, it will take some time how to resolve this problem.
All right, I see. Well, Professor Song, wrapping up the show, aside from what President Yoon mentioned, what are other issues that South Korea needs to deal with, and what are your hopes for South Korea in 2024?
Well, my hope is that our president succeeds. And that involves, and we're talking about how he approaches things, and what we have noticed. A lot of people would say that he is still in the mindset of a prosecutor general in many matters. But I hope that going forward, he will gradually be transformed into a presidential leadership, so that he will talk to the opposition leaders how to make compromises and make national agenda prominent, so that people can debate and come to national consensus to negotiate these difficult challenges, and not only in the domestic areas, not only those reforms, but we are facing a global agendas as well. And the President Yoon has already indicated that he wants to be a global player as well. So in order to do that, I think that the national affairs has to be in order, the leadership, and also putting the right people in the right places and making those interconnected agendas work together, I think that would be a very, very crucial factor going forward. I think that that will show that this president can solve problems, not only the national problems, and contribute to global issues. So that's what I'd like to see in the new year.
All right, I see. Well, hope 2024 serves as a great turning point for South Korea, as our Professor Song wishes. Now, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Professor Song and Professor Hwang, for your time and insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.